The term gladius typically refers to a Roman short sword used from 3rd century BCE to 3rd century CE. The word gladius is Latin for short sword and would have just been used as a casual term by the Romans who spoke Latin. After the Gaius Marius reforms of the Roman military, all Roman legionaries would have been equipped with a scutum, which was Latin for shield, 2 javelins known as pila, singular pilum, and a gladius along with a dagger or pugio. Later, the legionaries would have also been equipped with plumbate, or war darts, singular plumbato. The Romans would use their pila to disable enemy shields and break enemy formations before charging with the gladius. The gladius was used primarily for thrusting, although it was extremely capable in cutting. According to Polybius, a Greek historian, the gladius was adopted during the Second Punic Wars, a war against Celtic mercenaries. He called the sword Gladius Hispaniensis, or Hispanic sword, because the sword was based on designs from Spain. The time that the gladius came to be is largely disputed, with some claiming that it came into the hands of the Romans during the First Punic War rather than the Second. Whichever it was, the sword came to prominence during the Second Macedonian War, where the Macedonians were terrified by what the Roman swords could do in the hands of Roman cavalry, as it was, as I said before, extremely capable in the cut. It was once believed that the cavalry sword was different from the one used by the infantrymen, but this belief has been dropped by many historians. It's also possible that the sword's design was influenced by the older Greek Xyphos sword, that was possibly the sword that was used by the Romans before the gladius. The gladius was made from steel, which was made in a bloomery furnace. The pieces that would come out of the furnace were called blooms. The bloom would then be further worked on to remove any slag inclusion, making sure that the bloom was all steel and not, say, dust or smoke. The sword was made from one of these blooms, or sometimes it was multiple. The bloom would be heated to 1200 degrees Celsius before being hammered into shape. Once the gladius was in the correct shape, it would have been heat treated, increasing carbon content by having the steel sucking the carbon from the air. In the end, the blade would end up with about 0.4% carbon content on the blade and about 0.08 carbon content along the spine. The sword would have been made different lengths depending on the time. The gladius had 2 edges for cutting on both sides of the blade. They had a strong taper to the tip of the blade, allowing it to be effective in both cut and thrust. The blade taper was much smaller than in later swords because these swords had to go up against much weaker armor, usually something that's mostly just padding or leather. The handle and handguard of gladi, which is the plural for gladius, was quite often ornate, made with bronze or silver covering the pommel and handguard. The grip was made from wood, possibly with ridges included for fingers. The blade would usually have the owner's name engraved on it. The gladius was made with a scabbard that would be attached to either a belt or a strap that would go over the shoulder. The gladius had many variants that were used at different times. The first one was the gladius hispaniensis, or direct translation being Hispanic sword. The hispaniensis was used from 216 BCE to 20 BCE and was between 60 and 68 centimeters long, including the hilt. The length was increased to 75 to 85 centimeters. The sword was made 5 centimeters wide. The hispaniensis was the first design and also the longest and heaviest, weighing around 1 kilo. The blade shape started wide at the base of the sword and then started to get thinner, creating what's typically referred to as a wasp waist, before becoming wider again. It would then taper substantially to create an extremely strong point. The mined gladius was likely commissioned for a wealthy officer. It is also known as the Sword of Tiberias, as it depicts Tiberius giving Augustus Caesar a statuette of victory. The blade was 50 to 55 centimeters and 7 centimeters wide. The sword was only 800 grams compared to the Hispaniensis's 1,000. Its shape is very similar to that of the Gladius Hispaniensis, with it starting wide before becoming thin, and then wide again to taper down to create the point. The mined gladius is more extreme in this though. The sword thins more than Hispaniensis did, and the tip is more triangular than Hispaniensis. The scabbard is made with bronze and iron. On the bronze and iron is a depiction of Augustus Caesar surrounded by the Roman gods, with Tiberius, his son, bowing down to him, presenting him a statuette of victory after Augustus's successful battle of Alpine. The Fulham gladius, or Mainz Fulham gladius, was the gladius used in the 1st century. It began use after the Roman invasion of Britain in 43 CE. Before him, Gladius was 50 to 55 centimeters long and 6 centimeters wide. The full length of the blade was 65 to 70 centimeters. Before him, Gladius also starts wide at the base before becoming thinner, but unlike the others, it then straightens out before tapering extremely to become the tip. Before him, Gladius has an extremely triangular tip and is the longest tip of all the gladi. The sword weighed 700 grams. The Pompeii Gladius was the most famous of gladi and was named after the town of Pompeii. The Pompeii Gladius was 45 to 50 centimeters long and 5 centimeters wide. The full length of the sword was 60 to 65 centimeters. The Pompeii Gladius is the same width throughout and has a much smaller but still triangular tip. The Pompeii Gladius was later lengthened and called a semi-sphata after the later Roman Sparta sword. The Pompeii Gladius weighed 700 grams. The Gladius was later phased out entirely to be replaced with the longer Sparta sword that was originally used by Roman cavalry. The design of the gladi could be seen in the 19th century French and American artillery swords that were very similar to the gladi of Rome. The Romans used the gladius to conquer much of the world and, along with other various weapons, they became the largest empire to ever exist.